The Denver Broncos are looking to get win number 7 against the Las Vegas Raiders. On their offensive line, though, they could be without Ben Powers. What's the status of him going into Sunday's game? We'll break that down and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers and first listeners out there in Broncos Country. You make Locked On Broncos exactly what it is. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. You can check out my written work over there, milehighsports.com, and he is back. Daddy Sayre, congratulations, my friend, obviously on you and your wife having a beautiful, healthy baby. Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com, returns to the show here today. Just a lot to break down. Look, you missed a lot, my friend, but you know what? It was for a great reason. Broncos Country was so happy for you. They were sending a lot of messages, a lot of comments saying, congrats, Sayre. That right there. I mean, like I said, you might be inspiring some other families to have kids now, my friend. So we appreciate you. Glad to have you back into the mix. You can check out Sayre's written work, predominantlyorange.com, and NFL Spin Zone. And Broncos Country on today's episode of the show and the immaculate return of the Bedinger. We're going to go over our Week 12 bold predictions for Sunday's game against the Raiders. We're going to highlight Broncos' keys to victory, what they must do in certain facets on offense and defense in order to ensure a victory. But we're going to kick things off by talking about the Broncos injury report. Denver hopeful that Ben Powers can make it to Sunday's game after dealing with the shoulder injury. Sayre, let's open up right there. Obviously, we want to give a special shout out real quick to our friends over there at the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Ben Powers, a little bit of a development that, is kind of unfolded throughout the week, Sayre. After the Falcons game, I saw him in the locker room. He's coming through where usually players get x-rays, MRIs after a game, but he's wearing a normal street t-shirt. He had a huge ice pack on his shoulder. So I was like, all right, this is something we're going to have to monitor throughout the week. Wednesday comes around. He did not participate in practice, but he was limited on Thursday, which is a good sign there. But, let's talk about maybe the impact, what it may look like if Ben Powers is able to go, if he's unable to go here on Sunday. Big for the Broncos offensive line.
Yeah, they obviously need to have Ben Powers out there, Cody, because you want that depth chart to be as loaded as possible, of course, and especially on the offensive line. But we know the Broncos, they have other guys that can play. Calvin Throckmorton has been called up a number of times, obviously. But it will be interesting to see how they would adjust at the guard position specifically. Seems like they're very well suited to potentially suffer a loss at tackle. You got obvious guys that can replace, like Alex Palczewski, Matt Parrott, things like that. And at center, we saw Luke Wattenberg goes down, Alex Forsythe comes right back in. So at guard, what happens there? I mean, if Ben Powers can't play, that's going to be interesting to see. Do they do some shifting there? Is it just Throckmorton, or what would it be? So that's what I would be interested to know and to see how they, operate in that way, especially because I think you kind of got to be ready either way, right? If you go into this game, Ben Powers gives it a shot. He goes in and says, hey, I'm going to try to play. Well, you might need somebody to step up in the middle of the game at that point in case something would happen. So it's definitely a situation right now where, the Broncos, they've got to be planning for all potential, outcomes here.
Well, we're sitting down here Friday morning recording this. The Broncos are going to have practice here in a few hours. I'll be out there. We'll see if we can get an update. I'll probably do a Locked On Now here for Broncos Country, be able to hear the latest update when that injury report gets announced. We'll see if he upgrades to full participation or if he's limited once again, because I feel like if he's limited here once again today, Sayre, it could be a true game time decision. But if he is unable to go, I would actually keep an eye on Alex Forsythe as the guy who could slide over and start there at left guard. And the reason I say that is when you look at training camp, remember when Luke Wattenberg was getting all of the reps at the center position, like there's times that Alex Forsythe was rotating in at guard with the second team offense, getting reps there, but also then getting center reps with the third team offense, vice versa, flipping it around there. So they want him to be able to play a multitude of positions. I thought when he filled in for Wattenberg at center, he did a tremendous job. So if he has to step in at guard, I'm very curious to see how that's going to look for him. And, hey, worst case scenario, let's say it's like, all right, you really want to be a little bit stronger at the guard position Sayre, I also wouldn't be surprised if they slid Wattenberg over to left guard and Forsythe at center for a game, right? And people, I think people forget. Remember when Quinn Miners had that scary kind of heart situation pop up last year in Los Angeles? Luke Wattenberg filled in at right guard, did actually, I think, a really good job there. I think Luke played guard pretty well for Denver when he's played in those positions. Tackle was the one where, like, I don't know if tackle is going to be in the cards there for Wattenberg's future. But Denver's got options here, though, right? But also at the same time, I think an injury here to Ben Powers, and if it keeps him out, Sayre, it comes at a rough time because, like, the Broncos offense, it feels like it's now starting to click. It's starting to get to where it needs to be. And now you get to take on the Las Vegas Raiders. Look, folks, and I want to use Thursday Night Football as a prime example. The Pittsburgh Steelers at the top of the AFC North taking on the Cleveland Browns, who only have 2 wins on the year. And all of a sudden, the Cleveland Browns, they come out and they win on Thursday Night Football. Granted, yeah, weather is a factor. Both teams playing. That's not why the Browns won. The Browns executed. They moved the ball. Then they punched it in the red zone when they were in there against that Steelers defense. And so it's like, it doesn't matter. I think when you have these divisional matchups, you can throw the record book out the window. We were talking about that with your boy Q. That is definitely something I'm monitoring here, because you're going to see, I think, the Raiders try to move some guys around a little bit. They have Tyree Wilson. You have Max Crosby going to play on the outside, but they may stunt on the inside. So it's like, hey, they may try to take advantage of, hey, if that guy's out, we're going to try to mess around a little bit and maybe try to get some pressure at that spot there. I just think it comes at a rough time with the Broncos offense and Bo Nix, who's won Rookie of the Week for the second consecutive week in a row. He's won AFC Offensive Player of the Week, and he's won the FedEx Air and Ground Player of the Week all in the same week. It's been a good week here for Bo Nix in the offense. You want to be able to keep that momentum going here this weekend.
Exactly. I love that, Cody. You caught me off guard with that one. A good joke, a good dad joke always gets me. I love that.
I'm getting there.
You're getting there. I love it. I love it. But you're right. I mean, you want to keep this momentum going here against the Raiders. And I think that Sean Payton had mentioned something last week when the Broncos lost that game against Kansas City on the blocked field goal. Like, he brought up the Justin Simmons blocked extra point when he was in New Orleans, and a number of other plays dating back through the years, like the horrible no call against the Rams in the playoffs, the Minneapolis Miracle, all these things. He shows the team this low light reel. And basically, he's like, we don't have enough time to watch all the highlights, but these are moments like that, basically define these teams, unfortunately. And so what are you going to do with that thing against Kansas City? I think something similar can apply to what we just saw with the Pittsburgh Steelers, like you mentioned, against the Cleveland Browns, right? Where you're talking about, hey, a team that's in first place, like in the driver's seat. You got a short week against a team that stinks, quite frankly. And I know they get paid to play as well. But look, it doesn't matter if the Browns or the Raiders or whoever is 2-8. Like, the focus of this team is something that I think is going to be tested after a blowout win. You kind of start to feel, I think Riley Moss even said it earlier this year, Cody, like when you start to win a lot of games, like, it can be easy to kind of lose your focus a little bit. You have to treat every single game as though like you're the underdog, or like you're being projected to lose, or like you're supposed to lose, those type of things. You have to keep focus. I think that's so huge for this Broncos team going into this matchup against the Raiders, is just don't underestimate these guys. They get paid to play, and you don't have the luxury of being able to sit there and be like, hey, it's just a 2-8 team, like no big deal. Let's just go take care of business and this, that, and the other. It's like, no, you got to actually go out there, and these guys are going to try to ruin your season. They're going to try to make sure you don't make the playoffs, and they have a chance to actually do that. Like, this is a big game for the Broncos.
Big in terms of AFC stakes. You got to improve that conference record. Denver's 2-4 right now. They got to improve that to 3-4 and hopefully climb, because then after that, you play a Cleveland Browns team on Monday Night Football that's got 11 days of rest because they played on Thursday Night Football. And it's like, hey, take care of business here. And I think this is the thing that you and I were talking about here on the show, is like the Broncos last year when they were 1-5, I'm going to use a Sean Paytonism here. They burnt so many calories on trying to get out of that 1-5 deficit. They got to 5-5, but then when it came to crucial games against the Houston Texans, the Detroit Lions, they had letdowns, and that ultimately ended their season, especially as promising as it was, kind of starting to turn around for Denver after, being that 1-5 thing. So where are you at this point? Like, this is a test I would like to see how this team responds. The Raiders, their backs are against the wall a little bit. Yeah, of course, they're going to be looking for their quarterback, and sometimes some of their guys are looking right now at the NFL draft. But, this is a team as well. The losing streak began after the Pat Surtain pick 6 in that Denver game in week 5. They want to try to snap that against the team that started their downward spiral for the 2024 season. So we're going to see how it all plays out here in Broncos country. Sayre and I, we're going to dive deep into our keys to victory, what we believe the Broncos offense and defense must do on Sunday in order to ensure themselves of a victory. You're going to get that and much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and this month is all about gratitude. And all along, Broncos country, you always show up for us, but it's also time that you show up for yourself. I want to give you a shout out because you do that every single day. And sometimes if you're not, hey, you need to find a way to show up for yourself. It's super important. And make sure you give yourself some grace and some gratitude and give yourself some thanks, especially during the holiday season. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we are trying our best to make sense of everything that's going on in life. And it doesn't come with a playbook. It doesn't come with a manual on how to deal with certain things or to deal with things that throw us off of our balance. That's, I think, where therapy can come in and be beneficial. I'm a big proponent, big believer in therapy. I've used therapy before in the past. I've utilized BetterHelp therapy specifically. And the thing I liked about it was I was able to go in and fill out a form. I was able to sign up within minutes, get matched with a licensed therapist. And then I had my first therapy session. I vibed well with my therapist. But if you don't vibe well with yours, you can change therapists at any time at no additional charge. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and best of all, suited to your schedule to meet you wherever you're at. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over there at the Game Time app in Broncos country. If you happen to be out in Las Vegas this week, you want to go see the Broncos take on the Raiders in an AFC West showdown, the Game Time app is the best place to find the best deals and prices on seats available for Allegiant Stadium. So check it out now. And they also have a brand new feature called Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks, they filter out the fluff to show you the only incredible deals that you're going to get on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Not only do they have the Game Time Picks feature, they also have the seat views where you can see exactly what the action on the field is going to look like inside of the app based on the seat that you have interest in buying. And they also have all-in pricing. It shows your total up front, so you're not hit with any surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
The Denver Broncos should win against the Las Vegas Raiders on the road this weekend in week 12 of the NFL season. But look, there's got to be some things that have to go down if they are going to make it happen. Cody and I, we got our keys to victory for the Denver Broncos here, both offensively and defensively. We're also going to talk about some bold predictions for this game. Look, we're going to look into the crystal ball a little bit here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. But Broncos country, thanks so much for making us part of your day, however you choose to do so, especially you everydayers out there who make us your first listen of the day every single day. Shout out to all of you. And as Cody mentioned earlier, really appreciate all of your well wishes for my wife and I, my family and I, as we've welcomed another member to Broncos country here in 2024. Little baby Ellis joining the team, Cody. Very fun. So, but let's talk about our keys to victory for this game, because I think that it's really one of those games that we talked about. Easy to kind of slip up. I mean, for the Raiders, it's also quite interesting, right? Because they played Kansas City on Black Friday, so they have a short week upcoming. So there's this issue of the Broncos like desperately needing to get another AFC win under their belt. They can't afford to lose to a 2-8 team at this point. But then there's also the Raiders side of things that like they have a road trip to Kansas City here in a handful of days. They play on a short week, and everybody wants to beat the Chiefs, right? I know the Raiders want to beat all their division rivals, but everybody loves playing the Chiefs. So I think here, Cody, we have something very interesting for the Broncos. I'm eager to hear your keys to victory in this game, because we could say all we want. Broncos are favored by 6.5 points, yada, yada. They haven't won in Las Vegas ever. They've never won at Allegiant Stadium. How are they going to make it happen this time?
Well, I think when you break it down in all facets, right, we're going to look at the offensive side of the ball. I think the offensive key to victory here for Bo Nix, Sean Payton, and Denver's offense here, sustained long drives, right? One thing I liked about Denver, I like when they can score quick. And Sean Payton told us too a couple weeks ago. He's like, I don't know how to score slow. That's the thing is like some teams strategize to have like a really long drive that's going to end in points. He's like, you got to score fast. Like, in the NFL, you're only going to get a certain amount of possessions and opportunities. So for Denver, it's just like sustain long drives, right? And I think the opening drive that they had against the Atlanta Falcons was a great example, right? They found themselves backed up into a 3rd and 9 early on, and Bo finds Cortland Sutton for a first down. This week, I mean, you look at the Raiders, you look at the injury report. I mean, their top 3 cornerbacks could miss this game. That was something we talked about with your boy Q in the crossover show. So if that happens to be the reality, like take advantage, but sustain long drives. Try to take as much time off the clock as you can and turn that into points. Like that's the how to do it is going to be tough, right? It's like, hey, you got to be efficient on 3rd down. When you're in the red zone, you got to find a way to get into the end zone there. But the reality is, like, if Denver can have a 10-play drive, 9 to 10 play drive where, hey, they take 7 minutes off the clock, they score. I like that. I like putting that into the favor of the Broncos defense now against that Raiders offense. And surely the Raiders have some weapons there in Brock Bowers, but their 2 top running backs could also be trending towards being out in this game. We'll find out officially later here on Friday. But it's like, that's where you really just have to come out there and say, hey, like, we want to put the game in our hands, not in their hands. I think that's going to be a big key for the Broncos offense in terms of having those long drives. Defensively, it's the cliche, get off the field on 3rd down. I go back to that first Raiders matchup, Sarah, and on that first drive that obviously ended in Brock Bowers having that big time touchdown. Denver had 2 3rd and 9 situations, I think, on that first drive there. Gardner Minshew scrambled and picked one up with his legs because Denver had really good coverage, but he's deceptively athletic. He can do that. He can pick up the first with his legs. And then they got, I think, a pass conversion there on a 3rd down as well. So for me, it's like, get off the field on 3rd down against this Raiders team because that's an area in which they struggle, and afford yourself the opportunity for the offense to get the ball. Now I'm going to hand it over to you. When you talk about keys to victory here for Denver's offense, Denver's defense, where are you at in terms of what Sean Payton and the Broncos must do?
Well, you hit on it, Cody, with taking advantage of that banged up Raiders secondary. I think the Broncos just need to make sure that they, just like they did against Atlanta, right? Where Atlanta's pass defense and their pass rush have struggled all year. The Broncos have been so good at taking advantage of clean pockets. You got to take advantage of where teams are the weakest. And we've seen the Broncos be able to keep a number of pass rushers at bay this season. I know obviously Bo Nix does his part with that, but the offensive line working in conjunction with Bo Nix have been able to really keep pass rushers at bay most of this season. So I think that's really going to be one of the biggest focuses, is take advantage of that banged up Raiders secondary, and then don't let Max Crosby take over the game. Like, that cannot happen. It can't be a situation where, man, he's dictating, okay, it's 3rd and long or 3rd and medium or whatever, and he's coming through for a sack, or you have a miscommunication, or you don't have a hot read or something like that, and you just find yourself getting in trouble. I think don't let him.
You mean no more one-on-one blockings with Adam Troutman against Crosby?
I would say not. I would say not. I don't think that's going to work out too well. So don't let Max Crosby take over this game. And then for the Broncos defensively, Cody, I know you said these keys to victory are always very simple. We understand that. I mean, get off the field on 3rd downs, create turnovers, right, against this Raiders offense. The Raiders have turned the ball over 20 times already this season. That's 2nd worst in the league, but they are the number one worst team in the NFL in terms of percentage of turnovers per drive. So although they aren't the worst in terms of total turnovers, they are the worst in terms of turnovers per drive. So what that means is when the Raiders offense has the ball, they're more likely to turn it over than any other team in the NFL. And if the Broncos don't exploit that, if they don't take advantage of that, I talked about it earlier in the week, Cody, when we talked, I think it was just post game. That was the last time that I was on. So that's what I'm thinking of. But Nick Bonito getting to the quarterback, for example, that football's got to start popping out, right? At some point, we're going to see him start creating strip sacks and more interceptions for this defense. I know they picked off Kirk Cousins at one time. I want to see this defense have a game like we saw against the New Orleans Saints, where it's like every time they drop back to throw, you feel like a turnover is possibly going to happen.
I'm very excited to see how this team tries to dial up the heat a little bit, right? Because, I mean, as you mentioned, the stakes are higher for them going forward here. These next two AFC games are big. The biggest game you have on your schedule right now is the one that's here on Sunday, and that is, hey, an AFC West divisional matchup. Improve to 3-4 divisional wise and take care of business. And, in the meantime, snap that streak. You never won in Las Vegas. Find a way to create some new voodoo here for the Broncos, because there are going to be a lot of Broncos fans who are going to travel to Vegas. It's a cheap flight to be able to go from Denver to Vegas, or from anywhere in the country to Vegas. It's pretty cheap relatively there. So like Broncos country always travels well. Find a way to get that victory in hostile territory. That's going to be a big thing as well. We're going to dive into something else that we're going to do on the show. We haven't done this in quite some time. We're going to do bold predictions here that we're going to have for the Broncos game this Sunday against the Las Vegas Raiders. You're going to get that much more here on today's episode of the show. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Built Rewards. And if you're a renter, I'd start taking advantage of Built if I were you, because here's the thing. We earn points on groceries, travel, and practically everything else that we buy, but we should also be earning points on rent, one of our biggest monthly expenses. And Built changed the game by letting renters earn high-value points on rent and around their neighborhood. There is no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties around the world where you can redeem your Built points towards. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl to start earning points on your rent payments today. As we jump in the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we want to say thanks once again, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. And also for all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country, if you don't know, we have a show for you legitimately every single day of the week, Monday through Friday. You get post-game shows on Sunday. So if you have not turned into an everyday listener, what's going on with that? You want the fresh, latest, up-to-date Broncos news content and coverage without the hot takes, without the clickbait. You get that here. I attend practices. I attend games. Sayre and I break everything down so that Broncos Country has the best access to the best information possible without any of the other silly stuff that sometimes that you see out there in the social media sphere here. But with that said, Sayre, going to do something a little bit different this week, right? We usually do players to watch, keys to victory. We talked about keys to victory. We already know the players that we have our eyes on, and Broncos Country already has their eyes on a handful of players. If we were to do it, I guarantee you the unanimous selection will probably be Bo Nix this week that everyone's got their eye on, coming off of the big week he's had. Hope he can maintain that pace right here. But I want to get into bold predictions here where it's like, all right, instead of saying like, hey, these are the players we have our eyes on and here's why, just looking at this matchup, looking at the tail of the tape, we're coming up with something like, hey, what do we expect to see happen in this game on Sunday? I think mine definitely a little bold. I mean, I can see it happening, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge when you factor in the how aspect. My bold prediction here, Sayre, I have Bo Nix rushing for 2 touchdowns on Sunday against the Raiders, right? Whether that's a Q Breeze sneak where he's going to do that, I don't like that play. It always scares me watching him go up and then come down because you got a pile underneath you. It scares the heck out of me. The result obviously is great there. He had 1 rushing touchdown against the Raiders in their first matchup, and he had 2 passing touchdowns here. But I think there could be a situation where he could punch it in twice using his legs, whether that be on a scramble drill or whether it be a QB sneak. I've got Bo Nix rushing for 2 TDs in this game against that Raiders defense.
I love that. I absolutely love it. I would love to see that, because if Bo Nix is running for touchdowns, say the Broncos, they're probably doing pretty well offensively. I would not mind seeing that, Cody. Wouldn't mind seeing it. When I think of bold predictions, I kind of start thinking about like, all right, what's on my wish list for the game, right? Do I want to see like a couple of 50-yard touchdown plays in this game? I'd love to see that. Would absolutely love to see that. Do I want to see a couple of defensive touchdowns or a return touchdown? Like, those are tough things to happen. How about this? Sean Payton early in the week was talking about how tough it is to get 3 running backs involved. Matter of fact, he's mentioned that on multiple occasions, right? He's like, I've done 2. I've gotten 2 guys involved, but getting 3 guys the ball is tough. What if in this game against the Raiders, And I don't know if it's on the ground or as a receiver or whatever. However it happens, what if all of Javonte Williams, Audric Estime, and Jaleel McLaughlin get touchdowns in this game against the Raiders? I mean, Sean Payton's kind of put the ball in his own court of saying, hey, it's tough to get these guys. It's tough to get 3 guys involved. What if he finds a way to get all 3 of them touchdowns in the same game? I mean, that's why it's important for the defense to be forcing turnovers. Get yourself a short field, get your offense some extra possessions, and maybe see if these guys can't make something happen, because I think Sean Payton is going to be motivated to get all 3 of them, meaning Williams, McLaughlin, and Estime, touches in this game against the Raiders.
I like that. That is the definition of a bold prediction, because I think when you think of it, people are like, how likely is that going to happen? I think there's a good chance. And it's to the point that you mentioned. When you factor in, like, if the Raiders have to kick off and Denver has to start, multiple drives, or they have to pursue long field, like, it's hard to imagine that being likely. But if Denver can ramp up the pressure, and look, right now they lead the NFL defensively, they lead the NFL in sacks, and how they've been able to do it has been incredible to watch. Nick Bonito, we're on Nick Bonito watch as well, where, hey, 2.5 sacks, I think, gets him tied for first with Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals. Maybe we'll see a 3-sack game here for Nick Bonito there. Extra opportunities there. But obviously, this is a fun exercise for Broncos country to get involved. Maybe even another one here, right? Because I think, can this be a streak snapper, not only in terms of you've never won in Las Vegas, but I believe it's 6 or 7 straight games, if I'm not mistaken, where Max Crosby has played against the Broncos. He's had a sack in every game against Denver. I think that's been the case for the last handful of years here. Let's try to make it. Is this a bold one? Probably, if you're following the statistics.
Yeah.
The Broncos, I'm going to go with another one here. The Broncos are going to hold Max Crosby without a sack. Look, he was not able to get after Tua Tagovailoa last week. Bo Nix is obviously shown some confidence, and he's shown some extreme awareness now. I imagine the Broncos, this one, maybe not so bold. I don't think that Crosby's going to get a sack this week. Of course, he's going to have pressure. He's going to be there. I think Bo's going to get the ball out of his hands before anything like that can happen. So Max Crosby's sack streak, I predict, will be broken this week against Denver.
I like that one. I do. Did you see too that Mike McDaniel was kind of taunting Crosby at one point? Crosby jumped off sides on a play. I don't know if all the listeners saw this clip that was floating around, but Crosby jumps off sides, and McDaniel's like, "Max, we didn't have a play called, Max," and he's like making sure he heard him too. It's funny because Max Crosby's out there talking a lot of trash too. So I think it's fun that Mike McDaniel.
What happened the last time he did that against the Broncos?
I know. Remember that? The whole thing of he's like, Bo, they can't hear you or whatever. I can't remember exactly.
34 straight.
It's just, hey, I'm just saying. So
and Max is great too. He's an unbelievable talent. Man, could you imagine if he was on Denver? Like,
oh my gosh.
If you had to take, I want to ask you this here. If you had to take one player from the Raiders, who would you put on your team? Easy. Got to be Crosby.
Easily Max Crosby. Absolutely.
Kansas City, who would you take?
I mean, I think you got to go outside Mahomes, right? Because that's
we like
that.
Bo.
We like Bo. I think that, let's say, probably Chris Jones or Trent McDuffie, although the Broncos corners are good. I'd say, man, add Chris Jones to that defensive front right now and see what could happen. That'd be fun. I like that.
What about the Chargers now? That becomes a little interesting.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because
Derwin James?
Do we have a Derwin James? I was just gonna say, do we have a Derwin James in Denver right now? And is he the guy? I'm trying to think if there's any O lineman that they have that would be like, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer to put him on the team. I don't think so.
Slater?
Maybe if you could have him and Bowles or something. I don't know.
It's tough.
But I like that pick of Derwin James. So let's say you could go from the division rivals and take Max Crosby, Chris Jones, and Derwin James. You're telling me you wouldn't do that? I think that's a great lineup right there of guys.
I think I just found a future topic for our AFC squad shows that we can
do
maybe in this next week. And another thing I'm going to leave you here with too as well. We definitely think all signs are pointing towards Brandon Jones returning here on Sunday. He was a full participant on Thursday, so that's good that they're going to get him back at the safety position. That's where the trend is. We'll keep you updated along the way here. Broncos country, big game for Denver on Sunday. We appreciate you. Make sure you share your bold predictions with us as well. If you want to reach us on social media, tweet me and Sayre at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, with hashtag DEN Bold Predictions, DEN Bold Predictions, and send it, and we'll obviously retweet and react to the best ones on social media. We appreciate you so much, Broncos Country. Make sure you welcome Sayre back into the fold here. It's great to have him back here. And the one thing we can guarantee you, unless there's breaking news that happens before the game, Sunday, immediately following the game, Sayre and I, we're going to sit down. We're going to break down Week 12, Broncos Raiders. Hopefully, Denver can move on to win number 7. We'll break it all down on our post-game show, Locked On Broncos.